Hi everyone, Kim Peremsky here with Agile Prowess, and I wanted to spend a few minutes talking to you about spikes. I've been seeing a lot of chatter on LinkedIn about whether spikes should be used at all. Should they be estimated? Should they be added to the product backlog? So I am not opposed to using spikes if they are done and used appropriately. So I'd like to hone in on that first topic about when does it make sense to use a spike? And I'm not going to be focused as much on whether they should be estimated or added to the product backlog or what have you. But first, I'd like to share some examples of where I have seen spikes used inappropriately. One example is what I consider to be a mini waterfall approach, where in one sprint, a team will conduct a spike. In the second sprint, they will actually deliver on that functionality. And in the third sprint, they will test the functionality. And essentially, they have created a mini waterfall cycle for themselves, and the spike is merely the design phase, if you will. So I don't recommend that pattern. Another way that I have seen spikes used inappropriately is where it's all contained within the same sprint, but the team creates a separate spike in their backlog and along with the backlog item where they're delivering the functionality. And in that case, you don't need to keep those two things separate because a spike is a form of backlog refinement. And so therefore, to deliver on that functionality in the sprint, the team could have done refinement earlier on, leading into the sprint during backlog refinement. They could have done some refinement in sprint planning, or they can do the refinement in the actual sprint itself. So no need to create that separation. And then we have what I consider to be more of a legitimate spike. And this is when the team truly doesn't know which direction they want to go or which way to proceed until they've done some research and experimentation. One example I can think of was a team that I was working with that developed some complex algorithms for a trading application. And they needed to increase the performance and response time of their trades. And in this case, seconds and milliseconds really made all the difference. And they had some ideas about which way they wanted to go in the development of their algorithms, but they weren't really sure which was the right way to go. And they didn't want to double down on using one particular algorithm if that wasn't going to produce the response times that were needed. So they did a spike so that they could experiment with a couple of different tweaks to the algorithms to figure out which one was the best one to use. One of my colleagues once used an analogy for spikes that I've always really liked. He said that if a team is going to use a spike, it is like buying a vowel on the game show Wheel of Fortune. So if you're familiar with that game show, you know that you're trying to solve a word puzzle and you spin the wheel, you select consonants, and you increase your jackpot. Sometimes you can solve the puzzle in that way. Other times you're stuck. And the only way you can solve the puzzle is if you buy a vowel, but that's going to decrease your jackpot by a few dollars. So no contestant is going to purposefully buy a vowel if they don't need to in order to solve the puzzle. So you want to treat a spike in a similar way. Because even though I said I wasn't going to get into estimation of spikes, the reality is there is still a cost associated because the team is spending their time and effort on that spike, knowing that at the completion of it, they won't have actually delivered any business or customer value at the end of that sprint. If you are going to use a spike, one thing to keep in mind is that you should have clear acceptance criteria. You don't want to just have a nebulous research task or spike. Instead, you want to be very clear about the outcomes you are trying to achieve and the questions that you are trying to answer so that you know that at the completion of that spike, the team will directionally know where they need to go. I hope this has been insightful, and as always, I'm interested in your feedback. Take care.